Hi everyone, this is Dr. Alex Ling, and I'm an orthodontist from Taipei, Taiwan. A little bit about myself: I received my orthodontic training at the University of Pennsylvania in the US, and I'm a board certified orthodontist with the American Board of Orthodontics. After training at UPenn, I moved back to Taiwan, and aside from working at a private practice, I'm now involved in some research relating with direct point aligners at National Taiwan University. So today I want to share with you the science behind LuxCreo and the potentials of direct point aligners using smart materials with shape memory effect. And we all know that direct point aligner is probably what everyone is talking about in today's ortho world. And I'm sure everyone is already quite familiar with how this workflow is going to save us time and money. And I think people are also familiar with the advantages that direct point aligners bring, such as being more precise in aligner fit and perhaps being able to deliver a more delicate force system. But what I want to do today is to focus on the science behind the materials that make these direct point aligners so special, and try to explain to you how these breakthroughs can really bring the change to your daily practice. So for those who have been following the recent advances of direct point aligners, you must have encountered these two terms: glass transition temperature and shape memory effect. Now these are not just fancy names. They have a true potential to bring change to how we treat our patients, and this is what today's video is going to be about. So let's start by looking at the structure of a polymer. Polymers come in two different forms. If they're well arranged and well stacked, they're called crystalline polymers. In other words, they're structured like crystal. There's also another form of polymers called amorphous polymer, which is a random structure and lack a clear form or shape. And because crystalline polymers are well structured, like the figure on the left, which shows how they're shaped under electron microscopes, they make up the strength and rigidity. They're also very dense and makes it difficult for light to travel through. That's why most crystalline polymers are opaque. Now, because they're tightly packed, crystalline polymers have a higher melting point than amorphous polymers. Amorphous polymers are loosely arranged, and crystalline polymers are tightly stacked. And they also have a specific melting point. So it's just like water. Water has a very specific melting point of 0 degrees. So below 0 degree, water becomes ice. And then above 0 degree, ice becomes water. So you can think of crystalline polymer as ice. It is hard and brittle, and it has a specific melting point. Now, the most important thing is that crystalline polymer does not have a glass transition temperature. Now here comes the guy that's going to make things interesting. So amorphous polymer. See how it resembles a heap of rope instead of nicely stacked crystal structure like the one that we just shown before? Chemists call this a random coil model. And amorphous polymers, unlike crystalline polymer that melts at a certain point, amorphous polymer has a glass transition temperature. So it's different from crystalline polymer. For amorphous polymer, as you heat up, you enter a zone that we call glass transition temperature. And this heap of rope you see on the left will start to loosen and unravel. So let's use this graph for explanation. So you see temperature here and then stiffness over here. So below TG, the polymer is solid and even glassy. But as you heat up and enter glass transition temperature, the amorphous polymer softens and the whole thing becomes rubbery. Now it's not fluid like a liquid, but it's not hard and glassy like this solid state that we usually see. So it's more of a state between solid and liquid. And remember, TG is not a specific temperature. Rather, it has a range of 10 to 30 degrees. So it's a range instead of like melting point, which is very specific. What is interesting is that most polymers that we see today actually consists of both amorphous phase and crystalline phase. So that's why we call them semi-crystalline polymer. So again, let's do a quick summary. So remember, there are two components in most polymers we see. The one on the left, the green heap of rope, that's amorphous polymer. And then you also see the nicely stacked pink crystalline polymer on your right. So below TG, both amorphous and crystalline polymers are hard and solid, and they're glassy. But once you get into TG, the amorphous polymer starts to loosen itself, and then the whole thing becomes rubbery. If you raise the temperature even more, you may pass the melting point of the crystalline phase, and then the whole thing becomes liquid. Now, sometimes it may actually decompose, but just remember, so glass transition temperature, once you pass that point, the amorphous part becomes rubbery. So what does glass transition temperature has to do with this? Well, in fact, it has everything to do with the so-called shape memory effect. So shape memory polymer usually consists of at least two components. So we can see the green circles over here are what we call net points or hard domain. Now the net points or hard domain usually have a higher TG and they determine the permanent shape. So that's the shape of the aligner that we want it to be. And then between these net points are the blue zigzags that we call switching segments. So switching segments usually have a lower TG and the switching segment solidifies the temporary shape at low temperature. So at a lower temperature, it's the switching segments that holds the shape of the aligner, while at a higher temperature, the switching segment softens and becomes soft, so it's the hard segments, the net points, that holds the shape of the aligner. The special thing about switching segments is that they're sensitive to external stimulus. So for example, once you raise the temperature to a temperature that is higher than the TG of the switching segments, they give in. So the switching segments become soft again and give in to the net points, which reshapes the aligner back to its original form. So let's use this cartoon as an example. So say that the red lines are the structure of the hard domain and the blue zigzag are switching domain. Now the red lines or the hard domains have a higher TG, and the blue zigzag, the switching segment, has a TG of about 60 degrees, for example. So now if we put it at an 80 degree environment, because the temperature is higher than the TG of the switching segment, which is 60 degrees, the switching segments or the blue zigzag is soft, and it's the red lines, the hard domain, that is holding the shape of the aligner. But if we put it into the mouth, put the aligner into the mouth, which has a temperature of about 37 degrees, and below the TG of the switching segments, because we're at a lower temperature, the switching segment cools down and hardens. Now we did not change the shape of the aligner, but now it's the switching segment instead of the pink hard segment that's holding the shape of the aligner. So now inside the mouth, you give the aligner a force. So it could be from mastication, it could be resistance from the tooth, but eventually the aligner will gradually lose its elasticity and deform after wearing. Now for traditional thermal aligner, you're done, right? Yeah, there's no way you can regain the elasticity, and that's probably one of the reasons that we see off track. So instead of blaming patient compliance or bad staging, a lot of the off track that we're seeing is probably because of material losing strength before the teeth are moved to their planned position. But this may not be the case for polymers with shape memory effect. All you have to do is to throw this deformed aligner into hot water and soften the switching segments. So once they become soft again, the red line, the net points, are in charge of holding the shape of the aligner and will gradually pull the aligner back to its original shape. So this is how you get your shape memory effect. And this is how these shape memory aligners are revitalized and their force, the rigidity, is reboosted. So let's do another quick summary with this figure. So the black dots we see here are the net points, and the lines, the intertwined lines that look like spaghetti in between, are the switching segments. So when temperature is high, the spaghettis or the switching segments are soft, and it's the net points that determines the permanent shape. So that's the shape of the aligner upon manufacturing. But if you put it inside the mouth or drops the temperature and subject it into under exterior force such as extension, the switching segments jump in and holds the polymer in a deformed shape, in a temporary shape. And to recover that, all you need to do is to introduce an external stimulus such as heat to soften up the switching segments or the spaghettis, and then the net points will gain back control and restore the whole thing, the aligner, back to its original shape. So that is why, to me, direct print aligner is not just about saving materials or saving labor or being precise because of 3D printing. It is 3D printing or the smart material that makes it so special, because the smart material responds to external stimuli through time and gives you more than one configuration of the aligner. In other words, you're not just three-dimensional. You're adding in the factor of time and the fact that the aligner changes its shape, and gives you a fourth dimension. So that is why in material science they call this kind of technology 4D printing, and that is why LuxCreo is naming their aligners 4D aligners. So that's 3D material or 3D printing or the smart material. So to wrap up today's talk, I would like everyone to think more about what glass transition temperature means, and also what shape memory effect is, and how these two concepts can bring a revolutionary change to clear aligner therapy. So for glass transition temperature, all you need to remember is that the amorphous part of polymers go through softening after reaching their TG. And if you add two different kinds of polymers with two different TGs, and you go above or below the TG of switching segments, this allows you to see the shape memory effect that makes these 4D aligners so special. Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this video, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or anything fun you'd like to discuss. Thank you all.